Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagnaraganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Varijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakanavitamscha Siddhantatpalasaranithyarasikam hamsam vilasatmakam mauraryakhya sudhama sevakadanam vishramba bhakti pranam yachna yukti vichakshanam tvakavido vaishista shaktya sada vandeham tripurarinamakyatim shri bhakti vedantinam panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaiva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayati Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaurtishe Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasri Shivaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Rama Eva Kevalam Kalo Nastiva Vitiranyatha. Welcome, dear devotees. Thank you, Madan Mohan Prabhu, for setting this up. Dandavat Brajasundari, Dandavat Shamananda, Dandavat Sakirati. It's nice to see you here in the form of your names. And Dandavats everybody else, or anybody else who might be listening to this later on. I've been giving these talks on the Srimad Bhagavatam, and I'm continuing with that today. So far we have gone through the 8 first verses of the first chapter, first canto. And today I'm going to go through the rest of the first chapter. So we will have verses 9 to 23, I think, or maybe 24. I forget now how many verses there was. It may seem random to go through the first 8 verses in maybe 3 lectures or 4 lectures, and then the rest of the first chapter in 1. But there's a reason behind this madness as well. This part of the first chapter gives the chapter the name that Srila Prabhupada chooses for it in his edition of the Bhagavatam. He calls the first chapter of the first canto Questions by the Sages. And that indeed is what happens now in this part of the chapter from verse 9 onwards. Shaunaka and the other rishis, they put a long list of questions to Sutta Goswami. Long and long, it's 6 questions. These questions will be answered in the upcoming chapters, chapters 2 and 3, to some extent. But as we shall see, these are also questions that will spill over into the rest of the Bhagavatam. So much of the rest of the Bhagavatam is actually going to be answers to these initial questions here by Shaunaka and the other rishis. This is an important thing for us to learn when reading the Srimad Bhagavatam. As I've said before, the Srimad Bhagavatam is a wonderful book, but it's also a fairly challenging book. And one of the challenges of the Srimad Bhagavatam is that it's this kind of discussion book, questions and answers. But the answers do not generally follow directly on the question. There might be 5 or 8 questions, and then the answers start coming in the next chapters, perhaps. And the answers are not always straightforward either. The Bhagavatam is not a book that gives us everything kind of readily chewed. like a bird gives to its chicks. We need to work with the Bhagavatam to get all of the benefit that it can give us. So in this class, I'm going to go through these 6 questions of the sages. I'm not going to go into the answers yet. That will come in upcoming lectures. But I'm going to go through the questions. Because asking questions is an important part of bhakti, the path and the process of bhakti, the sadhana aspect of bhakti. In the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna speaks about wisdom, he glorifies wisdom, vijnana, or sometimes called jnana. He says that it will burn to ashes all karma and so on and so forth. And then he also says how we can attain to that wisdom. He says that those who have seen the truth, those who are tattvadarshin, who have seen the truth, they can give it to us. But we need to approach them in a particular way. And that way includes bowing down. It includes doing seva. And it includes asking questions. So asking questions is an important aspect. That's the part of bhakti where we get to already as beginners use our intellect, use our mind, not to ask just any random question. How many windows are there in the Empire State Building? Or like one of my first questions, what happened to the dinosaurs? Those may be fun questions, but this is not exactly the kind of questions that will bring us forward on the path of bhakti. So the first chapter and the questions of the rishis, they will be interesting in themselves, the questions, but they will also be interesting in the way in which they show how to ask. So let us go now to the text itself. Oh, and even before that, I want to show you something. There's an old book called Sri Bhagavata Samlapa by Swami Bhakti Pradip Tirtha. The one I have is worm-eaten. I got it in India many years ago. It's not as old as it might look. It's published in 1952, which in my books isn't a very old book. It's an excellent book. It's an English book. Swami Bhakti Pradip Tirtha was a disciple of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He was one of Bhaktisiddhanta's most senior disciples because he got sannyas from Bhaktisiddhanta. He was one of the preachers who came to England in the 30s. And for a few years, he was also the Acharya of the Gaudiya mission after the passing of Bhaktisiddhanta. Bhakti Pradip Tirtha was a very respected and wonderful Vaishnava that everybody loved. And he wrote a few excellent books. One of those books is this Sri Bhagavata Samlapa. It's not a very thick book. And it consists of verses from the Bhagavatam in a kind of old-fashioned way. The text is in Devanagari and then the translation is in English. And what he does, Bhakti Pradip Tirtha, in this book, is that he selects these kind of discussions. Samlapa means discussion. So discussions of the Bhagavatam, questions and answers. And he compiles them in this kind of logical way that we would like. So he takes the question and then he gives the verses that are the answer next. To kind of help us extract the philosophy of the Bhagavata. I'm not going to read from that book, as excellent as it is, but directly from the Bhagavata, starting now with verse 119. Tatra tanjaya sayushman bhavata yad vinishchitam pumsam ekantata shreyas tanna shamsitumarhasi. Please, therefore, being blessed with many years, explain to us in an easily understandable way what you have ascertained to be the absolute and ultimate good for the people in general. So this is the first question. Pumsam ekantata shreyas. What is the absolute and ultimate good for men or people in general? They preface this question by saying that since you are Ayushman, blessed with a long duration of life, and therefore a person who we can imagine has also some experience, tell us what you think. What is the single most good for human beings? Already in the Upanishads, we get this dichotomy between Shreyas and Preyas. Preyas means that which is pleasing, that which is pleasant. It's pleasant to eat chocolate or pizza. It's pleasant to watch TV. It's pleasant to engage in sex. It's pleasant to do all kinds of things. But which things are not only pleasant, but which things are actually beneficial? Shreyas. The Upanishads say these are two different things generally. That which is preyas is usually not shreyas. But what is ekantata shreyas? Completely good. Most things are mixed. If I save an old lady from some robbers, that will be good for the old lady, but it will not be nice for the robbers. They will be quite disappointed with me. So most things are mixed. Is there something which is exclusively good? That's the first question. So you can see the sages, they start out directly with something important. What is good? And they're not interested in some kind of philosophical question. They're not asking out of idle curiosity, like, what's the meaning of meaning? Or how would you define art? Or something like this. But they're actually interested in what is good. What are we supposed to do? So they go on. Prayena alpayusha sabya kalavasmin yuge janaha mandasu mandamatayo mandabhagya upadruta. You may have heard this verse before, Prabhupada like this. O learned one, in this iron age of Kali, men almost always have but short lives. They are quarrelsome, lazy, misguided, unlucky, and, above all, always disturbed. Bhurini bhuri karmani shrotavyani vibhagashaha atah sadho trayatsaram samudritya manishaya bruhi bhadraya bhutanam yenatma suprasidati. There are many varieties of scriptures, and in all of them there are many prescribed duties, which can be learned only after many years of study in their various divisions. Therefore, O sage, please select the essence of all these scriptures and explain it for the good of all living beings, that by such instructions their hearts may be fully satisfied. So they went from the more general question first. What is the ekantata shreya? What is the exclusive good? Now they're saying, what is such a thing? Yenatma suprasidati, by which the Atma can be completely satisfied. And they preface this second question by mentioning the problem we have. People are stupid. And I'm not speaking about some other random people. I'm speaking about myself. People like me, we are really stupid. We are short-lived. We are quarrelsome. We are unlucky. And we are also in a problem because there are so many books. Just look around me here on my desk, how many books there are. There are so many books. How should we know which books to study? And many of these books also, to study them isn't an easy thing. You may have to learn some strange language. You may have to learn a new terminology. It's complicated. And we just have a little bit of time. So tell us, for the welfare of all living beings, by what can the self be completely satisfied? So that was the second question. Then the third question comes in the 12th verse. Sutrajanasi badram te bhagavan satvatam pati devakyam vasudevasya jato yasya chikirashaya. All blessing upon you, O Sutta Goswami. For what purpose did the personality of Godhead appear in the womb of Devaki as the son of Vasudeva? So now we're getting to Krishna. The first two questions were about what is good for people, what will satisfy their soul. They are not ignorant. They, of course, know what direction Sutta Goswami is going to go in. So they themselves are already hinting towards that in this question. Why did Krishna appear? Then the fourth question will come in the 13th through 15th verses. Tanna sushrushamananam arhasyanganuvaranitum yasyavataro bhutanam kshemaya cha bhavaya cha. O Sutta Goswami, we're eager to learn about the personality of Godhead and his incarnations. Please explain to us those teachings imparted by previous masters. For one is uplifted both by speaking them and by hearing them. Apanna samsritin goram yannama vivasho grinan tatas sadyo vimucheta yad viveti svayam bhayam. Living beings who are entangled by the complicated meshes of birth and death can be freed immediately by even unconsciously chanting the holy name of Krishna, which is feared by fear personified. O Sutta, those great sages who have completely taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord can at once sanctify those who come in touch with them, whereas the waters of the Ganges can sanctify only after prolonged use. So the fourth question here is about these avatars. Tell about them. The third question was about Krishna. Why did Krishna appear? Now, tell also about the avatars. And already you can, just by hearing these questions, you can already start to see the whole kind of framework of the Bhagavatam start to kind of come into focus. Then, the fifth question, in verses 16 to 22. Ko va bhagavatastasya punya shlokedya karmanah shuddhikamo nashrinuyad yasha kali malapaham. Who is there, desiring deliverance from the vices of the age of quarrel, who is not willing to hear the virtuous glories of the Lord? Tasya karmani udarani parikitani suribhi bruhina shraddhadananam leelaya tadatakala. His transcendental acts are magnificent and glorious. And great learned sages like Narada sing of them. Please, therefore, speak to us, we're eager to hear about the adventures he performs in his various incarnations. Athakyahi harer deeman avatara kathas shubha Leela vidadatas vairam ishvarasyatma mayaya. A wise sutta. Please narrate to us the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Godhead's multi-incarnations. Such auspicious adventures and pastimes of the Lord, the Supreme Controller, are performed by His internal power. Vayam tuna pitripyama uttama shloka vikrame yatchinvatam rasagyana svadu svadu pade pade. We never tire of hearing the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is glorified by hymns and prayers. Those who have developed a taste for transcendental relationships with Him relish hearing of His pastimes at every moment. Kritavan kila karmani saharamena keshavah atimartyani bhagavan gudha kapatamanushaha. Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, along with Balaram, played like a human being, and so masked, he performed many superhuman acts. Kalim agatam ajnaya kshetresmin vaishnave vayam asina dirga satrena katayam sakshana hare. Knowing well that the age of Kali has already begun, we are assembled here in this holy place to hear at great length the transcendental message of Godhead, and in this way perform sacrifice. Tvamna sandarshito dhatra dustaram nistitir shata kalim sattvaharam bumsam karnadara ivarnavam. We think that we have met your goodness by the will of providence, just so that we may accept you as a captain of the ship for those who desire to cross the difficult ocean of Kali, which deteriorates all the good qualities of a human being. So this was the fifth question. The fourth question was about the avatars. Who are the avatars? The fifth question again goes deeper. Tell us about the pastimes of these avatars. So we are going deeper and deeper and deeper. The first question was about what is the ultimate good for people. The second question was what will satisfy the soul. Then, who is Krishna? Who are the avatars? And what are the leelas? So these are the five first questions. And we need to read kind of carefully to even distinguish these questions, because they're not always put like one after the other. There's verses in between also where the sages are glorifying sutta, where they are describing what they are doing, like we are engaging in this sacrifice. So we need to carefully read to distinguish what's going on in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And again, we can get help from the commentators, from the previous acharyas, previous sages, to get help with this. But there's one more question left. And that one is given in the last verse, verse 23. Bruhi yogeshvare Krishne brahmanye dharma varmani swam kashtam adunopeti dharma kam sharanam gata. Since Sri Krishna, the absolute truth, the master of all mystic powers, has departed for his own abode, please tell us to whom the religious principles have now gone for shelter. This is a dramatic question. Krishna, the Dharma Varman, the very shield of Dharma. We saw him here in this world. He was with us just recently, but he is no longer here. And when he left, the age of Kali began. And by this complicated satra that we are doing, we're trying to counteract the influence of the age of Kali. But we know that we're not really successful. So is there anything else that we can approach for shelter now that Krishna is here no longer? So this is the sixth question. So in this way, in the first chapter, the rishis present 6 different questions, one after another. And they do it in a beautiful way. They begin, as I said, with the more general question. And then they go one by one into more detail. And they ask also in a very polite way. We heard already last time how they address Sutta Goswami, how they praise him. They continue doing so here throughout the questions they asked. And maintain this very respectful address towards him throughout. What we also could see here through these questions is, of course, if you are familiar with the second and third chapter of the Bhagavatam, you'll already recognize that, oh, this indeed is what is going to be spoken about. But if you're familiar with the rest of the Bhagavatam, you will also recognize that these questions are questions that will be dealt with throughout. Avatara, who is Krishna? Why did Krishna come into this world? Where can we find shelter within this age of Kali? And what is the ultimate good for a human being? These are questions that will be repeated. What is the ultimate good for a human being that is about to die, of course, is the big question that Parikshit is going to ask for from Shukadev just at the end of this first canto. So already here, right at the beginning of the Bhagavatam, we're getting a hint of some of the main topics of the book as a whole. This is one reason for why I find this first chapter to be so fascinating. Not only this kind of majestic first verses, Janmadyasya yatonvayaditaratas dharma projita kaitavotra paramo. This first and second long and very Vedantic and philosophical verses. But also here, the ways in which Shaunaka and the rishis deal with Sutta Goswami and how he's now going to start to speak with them is not only very philosophically profound, it's also very, in kind of from a bhakti perspective, also very sweet. So I look forward to seeing what Sutta Goswami is going to reply to the rishis in the next chapter. And of course, the next chapter will be the topic for the next class. Are there any questions or comments on what I've spoken about so far? All right, no questions. I'm happy that you were able to take part. This wasn't a very long lecture today, but maybe that's fine as well. Thank you for participating. All the best. Hope to see you soon again. Jai Vishnupada Paramsaparvrajagacharya Stotrashta Shishimad Bhaktivedanta Tripurari Dev Goswami Maharaj Shila Gurudev Ki Jai. Jai Nitile Pravishtam Vishnupada Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Nitile Pravishtam Vishnupada Bhakti Rakshak Shila Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Nitile Pravishtam Vishnupada Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. जय सच्चिदानंद मोहि ठाकुर भक्ति विनोद की जय। जय वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास बाबू जी महाराज की जय। जय गौरी वेदांताचार्य श्री परम विभूषण प्रभु की जय। जय श्री विश्वनाथ चक्रवर्ती ठाकुर की जय। जय श्रीनिवास श्यामानंद नरोत्तम प्रभु त्रय की जय। जय श्री कृष्णदास कविराज गोस्वामी महाराज की जय। जय व्यासवतार श्री वृंदावन दास ठाकुर महाशय की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भट्टर गणाथ श्री जीव गोपाल भट्टर रघुनाथ षडगोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। जय नामाचार्य श्री हरदास ठाकुर की जय। जय प्रेम से घोष कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्री गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। जय श्री अंतर्द्वीप मायापुर सीमांतद्वीप मध्यद्वीप गोलद्वीप द्वीप ऋतुद्वीप चंद्रद्वीप मध्यद्वीप मोद्रद्वीप रुद्रद्वीप श्री नवद्वीप धाम की जय। जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोप गो गोवर्धन द्वादश वर्णात्मका श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। द्वादश उपवां की जय। जय राधे कुंड श्याम कुंड रंगा यमुना तुलसी भक्ति देवी की जय। जय श्री पुरुषोत्तम धाम की जय। श्री श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्र सुदर्शन की जय। जय श्री मधुबन धाम की जय। जय दौजी गोपाल की जय। जय मधुबन वासी वृंद की जय। जय भक्ति विघ्न विनाशनकारी श्री सिंह भगवान की जय। जय भक्त प्रवर प्रहलाद महाराज की जय। चार वैष्णव संप्रदाय की जय। चार वैष्णव आचार्य की जय। छदा की जय। चरवीर की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। आकारा माताराज श्री चैतन्य मत की जय। त्रियशक मत सुमह की जय। श्री चैतन्य संघ की जय। समागत गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। भुवन मंगल हर नाम संकीर्तन की जय। गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यः च पतितानं पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः।
श्रीमन भृगुपाद प्रभु की जय।
हरि बोल।